Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with my favorite co host, Andrew Vallow. So, today we have a really awesome episode for you guys. The episode is free iTeros and about how it helps you out with cash flow and optimizes it, and how Andrew utilizes this. And I just think who wouldn't want a free iTero? I mean, like, it's something I think should be in every practice. I think if you're really serious about Invisalign, you probably should have more than one. And I believe the culture of scan everybody is critical. And even not just for the Invisalign, but for just seeing what's in their mouth and showing them as a diagnostic tool. So, Andrew, this is your subject. Tell us your view on the free iTero.
I think this is going to be a very helpful episode. And while I am going to talk about how we've been leveraging these quote unquote free iTeros in my offices lately, I'm also going to talk about some other things just in terms of optimizing cash flow. So, as I've tried to become more sophisticated as a CEO and business owner of our dental group, one of the areas that I've focused on in depth this year is cash flow and free cash flow. And I've always had the mindset that cash is king, but I think as your business grows, as you have more capital expenditures, as you are looking for, additional office opportunities and expansion and everything else, it just becomes that much more pertinent. And we're going to actually have another episode that may come out shortly after this one or around the same time or just before. I don't know yet, but I'm going to talk about basically attracting capital. But and for this episode's sake, the better your cash flow, the easier it is to grow on your own, whether or not you have banks giving you more financing, more capital. And so that's kind of what we're going to get into. So let's start with the iTeros and kind of, where this all originated from. So in 2025, earlier this year, this will probably, I'm sure, come out in 2026, January, but in 2025, we opened 6 practices in 6 months, which many of you guys are aware of. As we were opening these practices, it started to, I started to think about just the cost to get the practice open. We had gotten more cognizant of trying to, minimize the impact of these startups, trying to make our money go further, trying to make our funding go further, trying to make, sometimes we had a cash flow some of these offices, trying to make that go further. And, I started to buy these practices that were pre-existing dental offices that came with equipment. The one piece of equipment that never came with an office was an iTero. So, and I know there's some issues with transferring iTeros, and I honestly don't know where Align is at on that. I'll be frank. While Align has been a big part of our group as far as we do a ton of Invisalign, we're Diamond Pro, working towards Blue Diamond status. Align and I don't always see eye to eye, and I think lately it's the void has been getting a little bit bigger there. Basically, with the iTero, there's a significant cost. I mean, there is. It is a high upfront cost, to get an iTero for a startup office. You can finance it for sure. But when we were buying entire offices for $100,000, $125,000, $140,000, where we got the build out space, we got all the large equipment, some of them even came with a CBCT. And then all of a sudden, even with the pricing that I was getting from Align, I don't know, $32,000 for an iTero, it started to seem like a lot of money compared to all the other costs of getting this practice open. And I had thought about the Dandy Lab. So I'd heard about, in the past, I've seen ads, I've, had emails about it like, hey, sign up with our lab and get a free scanner. And we at the same time were negotiating lab fees pricing with a couple of labs we were working with. And I said, hey, why don't we ask the labs, would you be open to doing what Dandy does essentially and buying an iTero and letting us use it as long as we're a good partner to your office? And so we had approached two of our labs about that. One of them basically said, yeah, I don't think, right now it's something we can do. But the other one said, you know what? Yeah, we can do that. So essentially, like, we had the fee schedule already negotiated, and it's a very good fee schedule. And they said, hey, if you commit to X dollars in lab cases every single month, from each of these offices that we're doing this with, then we will buy and essentially lease for free, let you use the iTeros for these offices. And I thought that was fantastic because, again, at the end of the day, with the way that Align has everything set up, you buy an iTero, it's not like other assets that you can easily sell it. And, obviously every so often you have to get a new one and everything else. So to me, like not having to pay that cost up front, whether we paid it, financed it, and using a lab that we already liked, that we already had a relationship with, that we were already going to use anyways. And essentially what it did for the lab is it guaranteed them our business at that office. So, while we've got different labs we can negotiate with and we're growing and we're getting more leverage to get better pricing and all that other stuff, in their minds, they're like, hey, as long as they're using our iTero for free, more or less, they're going to keep sending at least a good portion of their lab work to us. So to the lab, it was worth it. To us, we're really not spending any additional money on the lab work than we would have. And we're not having to pay the additional, whether it was cash up front or whether it was finance monthly payment, we're not having to pay for the lab work and also pay that iTero payment. So it worked out great. And honestly, as far as Align's concerned, they don't really care. They don't care if the lab's buying the iTero or if you're buying the iTero. As long as someone's buying the iTero, they're happy. So I think it was one of these situations where it's kind of a win-win for everybody. But I'm going to stop here now, Matt. I'm going to let you, ask questions. We'll talk some more about the iTero, and I'll get into some other cash flow optimization we've done this year.
I was always under the impression that the iTero can only be used with Invisalign, but am I understanding you're using it with Dandy? Or is it Dandy doing Invisalign?
I had mentioned Dandy. We don't use Dandy. I've never used Dandy. Dandy was just where I got this idea from.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. We use local labs based in Florida. So we found labs that we liked that did good work, that gave us good pricing. And so it is one of our local labs that agreed to kind of do this program with us. And at this point in time, I believe they've given us iTeros for 3 or 4 offices, and we've got actually, and this is something we'll get into later, but we're have an LOI signed for office number 11. That should happen sometime in the first quarter, hopefully, of 2026, that we actually get closed on that. But we've already talked to the lab, and they've already essentially agreed to the iTero for that office as well. So
part of this thing is really important to unpack is not to say anything negative about dentists, but I think they're scared of these kinds of ideas and approaching these other businesses and saying, hey, you support me this way, I'll give you this much of my work. I think they're kind of alien concepts for dentists. Like, it's a big jump to go to a lab nearby and say, hey, listen, you buy me my iTeros, I'll give you all my business. Like, I think it's a conversation that's hard for a lot of people to approach. And I would do it. Like, that's something I would definitely come up with, right? If you're a doc and you see, like, you saw this opportunity, and you're like, okay, so if I get these iTeros, I can give them all my business. They'll give me the iTeros. I don't have to buy it for the practice. I have it instantly. And I know that if you go and do business with Align, a lot of times there's a deal where if you buy the iTero, right, if you get the iTero for free, if I remember correctly, and you do a certain amount of trays in a year, you don't have to pay for the iTero. So was there a quantity of trays you had to use to get the iTero?
No, so what you're talking about is a fusion deal, and I don't know if Align still offers that or not. I haven't actually bought an iTero for one of our existing offices in a little bit, and honestly, I think the fusion deal will no longer work for us because the way the fusion deal works is it is based on your benchmark, so the number of cases you did the previous year, and then they want to see increased cases, and then it's not free. It's not free. It's a nice discount. But again, just through our growth and AACA and other, whatever it was, I think I was essentially getting the same pricing that I used to get with the fusion deal when I was, single 2 offices, whatever. But no, there was nothing from the lab or from Align as far as the number of Invisalign cases we had to do. It was just the amount of, and we're not sending Invisalign to the lab. So the Invisalign's like totally separate. And that's why I want the iTeros. I'll be totally honest.
You're getting the iTero for the other work for the lab.
Well, I get the iTero to do the Invisalign. So like at our implant offices, I don't buy iTeros. We have been using Trios, although I get it now. I'm actually not
I'm online
super happy with Trios right now either. So we're actually looking at potentially, and we're looking at a couple other scanner models for some of these new offices, or as we're adding more scanners to offices. But iTero does work for restorative work. And I'll tell you, as the more recent generations have come out, it's gotten better. So it
it's
is,
really jumped
yeah,
leaps
no,
and bounds.
it works well. It's good. It is it is good for full arch. I mean, we use the iTero for all of our general offices where we do full arch implant work at essentially all of them now. And we're using the iTero to scan that full arch implant work. So it absolutely, if anyone's sitting there thinking that an iTero cannot work for full arch implant workflow, it absolutely 100% can. That said, are there other scanners that are better suited for it out there? Yeah, there probably still are, even with the advancements that iTero has made on that front. But here's the thing: again, even a good deal on an iTero, you're looking at around $30,000 to $35,000 usually, whereas you can get a good deal on some of these other scanner models for 10 to 15,000, and potentially be even better with the full arch implant work. So that was my whole point, was that I would not buy the iTero if I wasn't doing Invisalign. That's the reason I buy the iTero.
You're such a pirate. So I want to analyze this for a second. Okay, so you could buy a $10,000 to $15,000 scanner.
Yep.
You prefer the iTero because of the volume of Invisalign you do, and the iTero can work in a digital workflow for implants and arch work, right? So Andrew Vallow, in his infinite genius, says, I'm going to have to buy these lab cases anyway from somewhere.
Yep.
So I'm going to go to the lab and say, if you really want all my business, I'm going to leverage that I have 10 practices or whatever you're at right now. You think you're 10. You're going to buy me all my iTeros. And then they're securing your business. So you're leveraging something that you would have already had to pay for anyway. And then you got a critical piece of equipment for cash flow for each practice for free. And my opinion is, if you're doing Invisalign, honestly, in any volume, you can't have enough iTero scanners.
Yeah.
Like you can't, right? So Andrew Vallow, in his infinite pirateness, goes to a lab and says, hey, man, I'm going to spend this money anyway, but if you want the money, you're giving me iTero scanners. And they go, yes. So really, you're ahead completely around the whole deal.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, at the end of the day, because of our volume, not just the number of offices, but the amount of, I mean, we do a ton of dentistry. We do a ton of full arch work. We do a ton of smile makeovers. So, we are an attractive client for labs, and there are many labs vying for my business. And we can negotiate on pricing all day. And, one lab might give me a couple extra dollars off on a crown, or, a little bit more off on a full arch workflow, or whatever it is. But everyone kind of has their minimum pricing for these labs. And so we had found a handful of labs that did good work, that we were happy with, that were reliable on timing. And their pricing, again, I think certain things, maybe they were higher end, certain things but it was kind of a wash. I mean, honestly, the pricing was so close across the fee schedules that it wasn't really like one lab was significantly more expensive than others. And again, we like the work from the different labs. So like, how can we differentiate them? It's like, hey, if you want all this business on a monthly basis, buy the scanner. And like for the lab, there's not a whole lot of risk, because if we're like, you know what, we don't want to work with you anymore, now they've got an iTero that they can take back, and they can essentially give to another office that they're trying to attract as a client. So like in the lab's mind, and eventually, obviously, the iTeros eventually paid off. So, by getting so much of our business, making so much profit on a monthly basis that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, eventually the iTeros more or less paid off, and now they've got, more or less a paid off iTero. And I'm paying it off doing lab work I would have sent to somebody, but I'm guaranteeing that I'm sending it to them in order to get that iTero that I got to use. So like, that's where I said, I feel like it really has been a win-win situation. In fact, it's been such a good situation that the one lab that was like, yeah, we don't know if this is the right fit right now, we kept using them at some of our other practices because we like them. And we didn't need iTeros at those practices at that time and everything else, but they started to see less and less work coming their way. And ironically enough, they called us this week and said, hey, do you guys need any more iTeros right now? We're actually looking at rolling out this program now. So even I think they realize like, hey, this is a great way to secure business, at good offices. So Now we've almost got 2 different labs that are kind of vying for our business and offering us the free iTeros to do it. So I literally had a conversation with our CRO today about like, hey, do we need any more iTeros at any of our other offices? So we're like, it's a good situation to be in. It really is. But
Andrew has labs throwing iTeros at him. So they came back and said, this program you come up with, we're going to start it now. Real quick, and I have something to add to this. The labs you approach. So if you approach like a mom and pop replaceables lab or whatever, they're probably not going to entertain this. Can you tell me the size of these labs?
These are, I would say, maybe they're not Glidewell, but they are, I'd say medium large to large, local regional type labs. So, they're based in Florida, which we like, from as far as that locality goes. But they're not tiny mom and pop shops. Otherwise, you're right. It would be challenging for them, I think, even though honestly, like it kind of cash flows. It does work, by securing the business. But I think it would be tough to get them to go along with that idea. So if you're working with a really small old school lab, you might have trouble getting this idea across. And again, guys, I mean, like honestly, if you're in the growing phase of your practice startup, if you're not doing a ton of if you're not sending enough volume to the lab, it's not going to make sense for them to do this. So you got to think about, you've got to be sending the lab more monthly volume in lab cases than what their iTero payment is. Otherwise, they have essentially, it doesn't make sense. The math doesn't math. So you've got to have enough volume at your office for it to make sense, and you've got to approach the right lab. But I'll tell you what, if you do have a, growing practice or multi-locations, especially if you've got a couple of different labs that you work with, if there's, if I think it's worth trying. I absolutely 100% would. And I'm not going to tell you the names of the labs we use just because I don't know that they want to necessarily expand this program or what their criteria would be. So I don't want to put
probably
them.
Don't.
I mean, for the right people, they probably would, but I don't want to put them on the spot. I didn't ask them permission. So I don't want to, put it out there for them. But I'm telling you guys, if you're listening to this and you're doing a good amount of lab volume and you've got to, you think your lab might want to secure that or secure, let's say you're splitting it up and they might want to secure more work, or there's other labs you're considering, I would go to them and I would offer this. Cause again, Dandy, as far as I know, Dandy piloted this program. They were the first ones who saw it. And at the time I was like, I didn't necessarily hear all kinds of great things about Dandy. And I didn't want to switch labs, and their fee schedule wasn't where I wanted to be and everything else. So like, I didn't want to switch labs just to get a free scanner. However, if you can use a lab that you like with a fee schedule that you like and get a free scanner out of it, I mean, I think that's an amazing opportunity. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong. I say this. I'm trying to think about single practice owners, right? So if I was like a single practice owner doing some volume and kind of splitting it up, or if I was a single practice owner shopping for a new lab that was medium size or bigger, you might not be able to negotiate an iTero, but you might be able to negotiate a less expensive scanner, right? So like, I'm a single practice owner, our listeners, right? So you guys listening, I think this is a strategy, and Andrew can expand on it. And I'm not happy with my lab, or I need a new lab, or my volume is growing and I want to go to a better lab. I approached that lab and said, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm not happy with these guys. I want to give you the business. I think, if I remember correctly, I've shopped scanners a little bit. There are like some $5,000, $7,000, and $10,000 scanners out there.
Oh yeah.
You could say, and you might already have a scanner, but having a second backup scanner is nice. And you could say like, hey, I'll give you my business. This is the volume. Buy me this scanner for me to have to facilitate the business. And as a single, you don't need to have 10 practices and be Andrew Vallow. I think if you're doing significant volume, you could leverage a less expensive scanner as a backup or as a second one to double your workflow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of reducing bottlenecks to productivity in your office. So like the bottleneck could be number of operatories, where you'd find a way to add more. It could be number of assistants where you bring on more assistants. It could be number of doctors. Hey, we need another associate here. And it could be technology. It absolutely could be number of scanners or, intraoral camera. If you've got one intraoral camera, you're running room to room with that thing. Just buy one for they're like $300 for mouthwash. So like that's my thing is if something is slowing down efficiency and workflow in your office, it is leading to less production, less collections, less revenue, less profit. You need to go find a way to make it work. And, for a lot of things, it just means investing in it. But this was an area where I was able to, find another solution that's worked. Again, I think it's been a great fit for both us and for the lab. And to Matt's point, it doesn't have to be an iTero. If you're not doing Invisalign, I'm sorry. If you're not doing Invisalign, you don't need an iTero. You don't. Get a Trios, or again, there's a lot of these kind of more generic scanners coming out now that are catching up in capabilities that are even cheaper, under 10 grand. So I think it's absolutely worth asking. And to Matt's point, even if you already have one, like, I'm sure there are times where you could be scanning more patients, but you're not because the scanner's being used. So go get another one for sure.
I have a feeling that dentists are not rock the boat aggressive people overall. From my time working with dentists, and I think you have to, Andrew recognized an opportunity zone where he was doing a tremendous amount of spending in a particular like segment of his, variable overhead, because labs aren't fixed. They go up and down, right? He looked at it and said, man, how can I leverage this? And I think if you're a practice owner or a group owner and you're listening, I think if you went through and looked at that stuff, you will find areas like, well, man, if I talk to that vendor to keep my business, or I'm not happy with that vendor, I'm going to move over here. There are probably other fringe things you can ask for to leverage it. I'll tell you, like, if you were a giant dental group bringing me 30 or 40 practices and you needed like 5 or 10 new websites, I'd probably build some websites, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that there's always a place for stuff like this. And this is the deal. I think some people get anxiety asking. I think some people like, man, I don't, how do I ask that? You just ask. And this is the deal. Think about it, guys. If you ask and you don't get, guess where you are? You are where you are now. If you ask and you do get, you're way further. And I will tell you, from being a vendor in dental, okay, if there's some kind of thing like that that makes the deal to secure your business long term, we will seriously, like, most vendors will seriously entertain it. So I think
you don't get what you don't ask for, 100%.
100%.
And I'll tell you what, literally this morning. So Henry Shine's been trying to win over some of our business. We had been primarily with another vendor, but as we've grown and as I've met some of the reps there, they're trying to see how they could fit in the equation. And I've been giving them some opportunities. And one of those opportunities is actually, ironically enough, we are looking for non-iTeros scanners, additional ones for some of our implant offices. And they had sent us a quote. And the pricing was pretty good. But I got back to them today and I basically said, hey, if you guys want us to buy these scanners through Shine, I need you to get me better pricing than this. And I said, think about it as laying the groundwork for more large purchases through Shine in the coming year. So, at this point, they are supposedly going to bat for me and trying to get better. But again, like, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. So, and I think, my team will laugh at me because they know that I'll ask till I'm blue in the face. And sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. But I'll tell you, more often than not, our vendors have come through because they appreciate our business, or they want to win our business, or they want more of our business, or whatever it is. So if you can find a win-win where it's like, hey, I've got, again, you got multi-locations, it's easier to do it. So I'm not going to, deny that fact. But even if you've got one location, you still have some leverage there. And it's never hurts to ask. And I've been asking since I had one location. So this isn't something new that I'm doing now because I've grown my group to the size that we have. This is something I've been doing since day one. Has it gotten more effective over the years? Yeah, probably. But I definitely had some traction even in the early going when I didn't have nearly as much to offer as a client. So I want to shift gears a little bit here now. We've been talking about scanners most of this.
I had one thing I wanted to add real quick. I'm trying to think in my head, like, where are the opportunity zones for this in a practice? And I might say something that doesn't make mathematical sense. You know better than I do. So you can say, nah, that wouldn't really work out that way. One thing I thought about was, if I did a really high volume of implants, could I leverage a 3D printer for surgical guides?
Yeah, so here, and it's funny you say that. I was actually thinking about that earlier in this episode as we were talking about scanners. I think the only downside there is when you're 3D printing things, it means you're sending less stuff to the lab. So the lab's probably not.
Yeah, not for the lab, from the implant company.
Oh.
Like if you're doing, like, if you're bio, whoever you're using, if you're doing a massive, not the lab, if you're doing a massive volume of implants, like you're doing all-in-X, all-in-4 snap-ins, you're doing implant-supported bridges, implants, and you're burning through single implants and abutments and stuff and variables and that kind of stuff, like, could you go to the implant company and say, hey, I have associates and stuff. I need surgical guides. If you want to keep my implant business, buy me a 3D printer.
Yeah, no, I think that's not a bad idea. Dentsply has given us a lot of free implant motors and things like that because of all the business we give them. But I actually like that idea, and I'm probably going to steal it the next time we need a 3D printer. So I'll let you guys know how it goes.
So I was right.
Yeah.
Oh,
For
it
once,
happens. I'm like a third of a dentist. I'm just kidding.
no, that was good. I like the thought. So to Matt's point, it doesn't just have to be scanners. I think there's other areas of opportunity for sure where you could leverage. Basically getting. And again, it's not like I own these iTeros, and it's not like you would own the 3D printer. The company or whoever would basically let you use it in return for business. So if I left, then they would take the iTero back. Like if I stopped giving them business, that's why it works for the labs, is because like that's kind of their golden handcuffs for me. Now, like if all of a sudden I wasn't happy with the lab work at all, or if I found a lab that was offering me half the price, then it would probably make sense for me to leave and let them take the iTero back and go some. But like it is at least in some sense that golden handcuffs where it's like, hey, as long as I'm relatively happy here, I'm gonna keep going to them because I've got the iTero I got to use. So I'm going to move on here, guys. I want to talk a little bit more about just optimizing cash flow and some of the things that we've done this year that, you could be looking for. The first one is just like payment terms. So we realized, earlier this year that, certain vendors without us even asking already had us on, 45-day net payments or 30-day net payments or whatever it was. And so we kind of made it a mission where we started to go to every one of our vendors and ask and say, hey, can you offer 60-day net payments or 90-day net payments or whatever it was? And surprisingly, the vast majority said yes. And maybe they didn't meet us at our ask. If we asked for 90, maybe they gave us 60, or if we asked for 60, maybe they gave us 45 or whatever it was. But most vendors are able and willing. And again, it may depend on the vendor and it may depend on the amount of business you give them and other things too. But most vendors were able and willing to do that. That's great for us. So, again, guys, cash flow is huge. And actually I was talking to one of our vendors the other day and I was like, you've got to realize, like, I'm not trying to nitpick. This is actually, this is another story, but I was basically saying like, hey man, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you've got to realize I just paid a $550,000 credit card bill last week. I just had a $320,000 payroll this week. So it's like there are a lot of expenses as you grow, and the more you can optimize cash flow with net payment terms, the easier it is to stomach those big expenses. You got more cash in reserves because you're delaying the time. You're allowing yourself to bring more collections in, and you're delaying the time where you've got to put that money back out. So like that's super helpful. We pay with credit card for almost everything from a business standpoint. Sometimes I, will, not fight, but disagree, with our financial team, our COO, our CFO about like trying to save credit card, fees. And so it's kind of like, man, like do we, and we do get some cash back rewards. So it does offset some of the credit card fees, but at the end of the day, we still spend a little bit more. And so like, it is kind of like a case by case basis of like, would we rather have the delayed payment and the increased cash flow, or would we rather save the credit card fee? So there are some of those things that, depending on the fee, the amount, whatever, we do pay with ACH or, check or something. But most things we pay with credit card, which, allows you to, again, delay that payment out of your bank account. Another thing that we did, and for most of you, this may not apply because most standard credit cards, you are on a delayed payment, fairly significant. But we had, as we grew, the general business credit cards were no longer a good option for us. And we switched to our bank, Huntington. They give us our business card. So we've got all of our cards for all of our offices. They're split by office for accounting purposes, but we make the payment out of our, our parent company for the group. And it used to be that payment was due on the 5th of the month. So basically all the money we spent in December, that $550,000 credit card bill, whatever it is, was due then January 5th. So it was very, very short delay on when we had to pay it. And we were able to work with them to extend that to the 20th of the month. So, I mean, that was huge. That gave us 15 extra days to pay that large credit card bill every single month, which really helped increase our cash flow and things like that. So
The scanners are there to facilitate business for the lab, right? So it's labs advantageous to let you have use of scanners they own.
yep.
Scanners become effective and out of date. Do they update them for you when they need them updated to facilitate lab work still? Will they swap them out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that will depend on how good of a partner we've been and how the lab's doing at that point and everything else. But it's a good question. I mean, again, this is a newer program for us, so all these iTeros we've been getting are new. So it'll hopefully be a little time before that question gets answered, that bridge gets crossed. But I mean, it's a fair point.
Didn't mean to change subjects. I just thought about that, came into my head.
No, it's a good question. All right, so we talked about net payment terms with vendors. We talked about credit cards. And again, if you have a standard business credit card, it probably is due later. They give you more grace period to pay it. But if you are using your bank, a lot of times the banks do have a set, date early in the month, and a lot of times they are able to work with you to extend that payment window. And that was really helpful for us. This is something else kind of interesting that we just piloted within the last month here. But so far, it's been getting a lot of traction. So we used to do for Invisalign, as if you've listened to any of our Invisalign episodes, we offer in-house payment. It's the only in-house payment plan that we offer. Everything else, if they want payment plans, they finance HFD, Cherry, Care Credit, Sumbit. We offer all those options. But for Invisalign, because they're only getting so many trays at a time, and it's a long treatment window and all that stuff, to lower the barrier for people, we do offer in-house payment plans. Now, it's great in the sense that we do a lot more Invisalign, but as we start thinking about it as a business owner from a cash flow perspective, it's not so great, especially because I pay my docs on production and they get their production when the Invisalign case starts. So basically, I was fronting them the production I am fronting them the production for these Invisalign cases. Now, the nice thing about Invisalign, they do have us on the 6-month net payment term. So the lab bill is not due for 6 months. So that does kind of help us out some. But either way, I started to think, man, while I do want to make it easy for people, it would be nice to encourage them to prepay in full whenever they can. And so, we used to anything, we would do 5% prepayment in full. And then for Invisalign, I was like, well, let's up it to 10 because, if they can prepay in full, I'd rather them do that. And if they're doing a third-party financing option, we're often paying, merchant fees that are close to 10%, sometimes even more depending on, the plan and the option and stuff. So it's kind of a wash there. So we upped it to 10%. And then, more recently, as we were kind of getting into Black Friday, and towards the end of the year, I told my treatment, so we've got sales meetings, and I told my sales team, my treatment coordinators at one of these meetings, I said, hey, I'd like to find a way to really up our Invisalign numbers as we head in the end of the year. A lot of people stop doing these elective treatments as we get near the holidays. So not only were we offering a great sale on Invisalign, but I was actually going to offer an extra $500 off if they prepaid in full. And one of our treatment coordinators had a great idea, and she said, what if instead of giving them an extra $500 off, we gave them free retainers at the end of their Invisalign? So for us, retainers are not included in Invisalign. That is the one extra thing they pay for. So at the end of their treatment, we charge $650. So it's actually even more than the $500 off I was going to give. But the advantage here is now we're getting even more money up front. So rather than the extra $500 off, we're getting the full amount of whatever the regular sale price is, the discount is. And as far as those free retainers that they're getting, let's be honest, most patients aren't finishing their Invisalign for at least 8 to 10 months. Some even longer than that if they're doing refinements. So that we're front loading, the payment, from the retainers or the free retainers or whatever it is. And we're not having to pay that lab bill for 6 months after they finish their Invisalign treatment. So, we're talking a year later, whatever it is, and then add another 6 months onto that. We're like 18 months behind. So I thought that was a fantastic idea. And people love getting, free things. So it's like we were already offering a discount. So yes, an extra $500 off may have been enticing, but hey, how about you get free retainers plus this discount? And the free retainers are valued at $650. So you're not going to have to pay an extra $650 when you finish your treatment, whenever that is. So we've been doing that, like I said, for about a month, and we have seen a large uptick in the percent of patients that are prepaying in full for their Invisalign. Now, with this, promotion, with this package, they have to prepay in full the full amount of the sale price, and they don't qualify if they're doing third-party financing. So, even though they're financing the full amount, we're taking the merchant fee hit. So, I mean, they can do financing, and they just don't get the free retainers with it. Or they can do the in-house payment plan. Again, they're still getting the discount, the sale, whatever's going on. And, right now, I think it's like 50% off we still have going on. So they're still getting a great deal on the Invisalign. They're just not getting the free retainers, but it is like extra encouragement for anyone that is capable of prepaying in full to do that, rather than just taking advantage of our payment plan options. So
That's awesome. Well, we have to wrap this up, guys. A lot here to unpack. I am totally amazed about the leveraging production with the lab to get free equipment. I think if we dug into that more, like the implant company, if you do high level implants, buying you a 3D printer for surgical guides, I could see that happening. Like, I really do. Like, I think that could happen. Like, if you were doing a ton of implants, like, hey man, I have a new associate who's doing implants. I do unguided. He needs guided. Go buy me a 3D printer. If he starts doing implants too, our volume's going to increase.
I was going to say there's even more value if you're doing full arch work and printing the hybrid temps. So like that's where most of our 3D printing comes in. Yeah. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to summarize the episode real quick. So basically, what my recommendation to you is, look for anything that you're spending money on, and find out, either one, how can I delay that spending? So whether, net payment terms, pushing out credit card payment terms, whatever it is, leverage, the work you're sending to labs, try to see if you can get the labs to provide something like a scanner for you, or, to Matt's point, an implant company, maybe a 3D printer. And then the other thing is, if you are offering any kind of payment plans, especially with Invisalign, I think we're still going to have the payment plan option. Again, there are people who are not capable of making that large payment, up front. So I want to have that there as an option. But this has been a great way already for us to encourage anyone who can to prepay in full to get that $650 value, the free retainers. And in my mind, it's worth it. It absolutely is, because if you think about it, that's all that more money you're getting up front. It's helping your cash flow, and you're not worried about that patient falling off their payment plan or disappearing, or, chasing them down. It is a small percentage. I mean, like, my team is on top of it, but it does happen. So if you think about it, the money we're losing by giving the free retainers, we're also saving money or getting money by reducing the number of people that default on their payment plans for Invisalign. So I hope this was a helpful episode, guys. Just as you're probably in the new year, sometime in January, I just want to make sure you're thinking like a business owner, like a CEO, and you're thinking about important things like net cash flow in your practice. So,
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please hit like, subscribe, share it, and please leave us a review. That's really, really important to me. I just want to call a shout out to Dr. Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed told me the other day that his Spotify report shows that his number one listened to podcast of the year was Joe Rogan, and we were number 2, and we love hearing that feedback. It made me smile. I was on a meeting with Doc Ahmed, and he's a great guy. So I'm sure he's listening. Thank you so much, Doc, for making my day that day. Also, guys, if you look in the description of the podcast, there should be a link to the Dental Unfiltered Virtual Study Club, where we bring in subject matter experts and we do lessons once a month on different subjects. Thank you, guys, and have a great day.